So, welcome, and I will have to introduce myself because nobody's introducing me, but I can do that. So, as you may know, I'm Côme Ferrand Coope, working for the Eurobarometer Association, Eurobarometer. I'm going to talk about our program, singingeurope.org, and I will start by very briefly explaining what is the Voice Project, because Singing Europe and this symposium are inserted in this Voice Project, so you may be interested to have some more details than what you may know or not know. So Voice stands for Vision on Innovation for Choral Music in Europe, and it's a 3-year program that will end up next May, actually, in a year. It's working on, you can read the official objectives of this program. And it gathered actually 15 co-organizers today, because we added a new co-organizer recently. They are coming from 11 countries, and we have a global budget of 2.4 million euros. Half of this budget is covered by the EU funding. The main aims are, it's quite broad project. We are trying to encourage new events and new repertoire to promote the voice, like we're doing here, as a universal instrument, to improve, of course, quality of vocal music. That's a shared goal for most of us, and to enable mobility for singers, composers, and everything. And of course, to keep on building these bridges, crossing the walls, the kind of work you are doing also. That's a very important aspect of the project itself. And last but not least, develop new tools for the promotion of singing in music education, and that's the reason we are gathered here today. I hope you're not seasick with my thing, but also like. I won't go into the detail of all the events we had and we will have in the frame of the Voice Project, because it's very broad spectrum: festivals, Academy for Conductors, professional festivals that you will know, festivals and activities for younger people, conferences about the Mediterranean world, and meeting between also choirs from all over the Mediterranean area during Choral Crossroads. So it's a very broad spectrum of activities. And this year we start with the symposium, and we will have a masterclass, then a Eurochoir session in France, which was added recently to the project, so that's nice to have this continuity over the 3 editions. A congress in Paris with Accorjoie, and the Polyphonia Festival at the end of the year. So I won't spend. But we are gathered today to talk about a research project. And Singing Europe is not the only research project we have in this Voice Project. We have Lullabies of the World, of course, that's a bit different, but I wanted to put it here, and Sonia explained what it was today. But we have different research projects. We have the Singing SOFA, which is led by the Leuven University, the Voice for Vocal Training, organized by Core and STEM, and the University of York, working on the vocal health of amateur singers. Today we are here to talk about a first project trying to assess and discover the situation of choral music in Europe, not so much in terms of quality or qualitative information, but really to try to gather figures and information, quantitative information, because we need that. So we are trying to answer some questions and put them into figures. So these are some of the questions we are trying to answer. How many people are singing in choirs, vocal ensemble, or vocal groups in Europe? How many and what type of choirs and ensemble are active? What, why, and where are they singing? What are the differences we can find between the countries? What is happening, and so on. So a whole set of questions. This research project, which is a pilot research project, because we know it won't be perfect in the end, but we are trying to also discover how we should do a perfect project, is operated directly by the European Choral Association in the frame of Voice. It will have a duration of 2 years. It will end up in 2015, when we will try to publish a final report that will gather the global figures we have found, split per country, interviews and case studies. another aspect is we want to keep the data as open as possible and to share it with stakeholders, with the organization who helped us. Of course, anonymizing the answers, because we have a lot of choirs who answered our survey, so we don't want to give names and addresses, but the data itself should be accessible to every people interested in the question with a good reason to be. I mean, it won't be published as itself, but we can share it. That's very important. I'm not directly organizing this work. The contact point is a guy called Roman Bartel who's working with us. So you can contact him anytime if you have questions. So we had some questions we wanted to address. And so we need data actually to get there. So we have two types of data. We have quantitative data about each countries. That's very pure statistical data about the situation. And we are also trying to gather some qualitative data from ensembles in each country, in the whole of Europe and in each country. So we have different methods to gather this information. The quantitative data, okay, and then you have for the quantitative data, we are trying to gather the existing data that may or may not exist from choral or musical organization, public bodies such as ministries or any kind of institutions, research centers, and so on. To do that, we, of course, have developed a questionnaire for choral organizations. So that's something we can do pretty easily because we have a network and they can be addressed and some of them will answer and give what they know. But we have to do a lot of what I call detective work. That's actually calling a lot of people, a lot of institutions, trying to trace. The first question is, does this data exist? Because that's the same situation you were describing in one city. Choirs don't know what the other are doing, organizations know a few organizations. And that's a situation in some countries they are not even aware that they have statistical data. So you really have to ask a lot of people in each of these countries to get this information. And it's amusing, but it's quite time consuming. So we are getting there. There's one thing that's absolutely imperfect, but that's still a good tool for us. That's called the Eurobarometer, and it's a large European study that's every few years try to assess the cultural situation in Europe and the situation of cultural practices. They do have a question about singing, and the question is something like, have you sung alone in a group in the last 12 months? And there you have the results. So the average in 2007 was 15%, and it went down to 11%. So we're talking about any kind of singing activity. So that's not what we're trying to know, but for each country, we then have something like an upper limit to start with, and an idea of the singing activity in the country. Are the people inclined to sing or not? So it's still something we can use as a background for our study. We gathered some figures from different sources from all over Europe. Here are a few examples, but I haven't gathered the sources just to give you an idea. So in Switzerland, we found this information from, I think, the ministry, a quite serious study. Estonia, but this figure most likely does not include school choirs and things. Sweden, so we had the first figure, which we were a bit disturbed by this 4% of people singing in the choir. So we went back to the people writing the study and tried to get the actual information, not what was published. And I'm sorry, what am I doing? Oops. And actually, the figure was more like 6. So sometimes when we see something strange, we have to go back to the source and actually find the contact of the people, because the ministry will publish something wrong. So it's a lot of detective work, as I was trying to explain. In the end, we know we won't find information for all the European countries. We have some countries who have this answer, so many choirs, so many singers. It's quite rare. One of the objectives could be to try and convince the European Union to add a question to the Eurobarometer. Have you sung in a choral setting or in a group setting or this kind of thing? Then we would be covered. We would have the perfect, not the perfect, but a good tool to assess this quantitative aspect. So, but in 2015, we'll have a report and we will have holes of knowledge, things we don't know, and we'll have things we know, countries we can cover or not. And that will be part of the process of this pilot research, and we will try to do something to fill these holes. Now, qualitative data, we decided that we wanted to collect data from the ensemble themselves to get more information about what they are doing as ensembles, how they are living their vocal activity. We set up a multilingual survey that you can find online under singingeurope.org. It takes 5 to 20 minutes to answer. It's, as of today, in 23 languages, which is very good. It's mostly, you don't have to enter, you can put comments, but most of the question you have to put numbers or tick things, so it can be multilingual and we can still exploit the results, was the idea. Even though most choirs leave remarks, which are very interesting too. So, does it work? That's a good question. Well, yes. Quantitative data, I've covered that. The qualitative data and the survey, we, as of today, have something like 4,000 usable answers, and I'm talking about completed answers, people who went through the whole questionnaire. Actually, the number of people answering is, as of today, a bit almost like 8,000, and we will be able to use part of it too, because we put the most important question at the beginning. So even if somebody stops the questionnaire in the middle, we can still use the first part. But we haven't cleaned the data yet, so I will show you a few results that are very temporary for the time being. Something very interesting. In these 7,000 answers, here are the top 10 countries as of 2 weeks ago, so I don't know. So it looks strange because the first country is Slovenia, and then number of choirs answering. And it's interesting because this result, Slovenia, is actually the result of only a very few people there deciding that it was worth for their organization and for the networks to convince people to answer this survey. And they had a tremendous effect. And so in Slovenia, we can kind of describe the situation because it's a 2 million inhabitant country, and we start having a good subsample, which is not the case actually in these other countries. So these are the top 10 answers. So that's what I'm telling about. I have to be very careful for the time being with any kind of splitting the sample, because if I talk about choirs with over 80% of singers under 15 years old, in the whole sample, that's only not even 200 answers. And if I want only the Hungarian ones there, I have 9 choirs. So I cannot say anything for the time being. We can say a few things about the whole sample as an example. That's what I'm going to do now. But you will have to forget all these figures afterwards because we have to wait to have more answers. It's just to show what kind of information we can get. And I will also present results without correlation. It will be really flat results for each question. What are the answers? Because we're not in the stage where we can really do this kind of work, which will be much more interesting, of course, our typology. So we still have some interesting information that are quite stable across the countries. Like, it seems self-evident, but maybe it's still information. They do work with conductors. They sometimes, most of the time, work with instrumentalists. Most of them do. And a good part of them, a third, never works with vocal coaches or vocal trainers. So you see, we have a margin of progression if we are talking about training the voice. At least a third of them never use this service. And we're not even talking about other kind of mixing with other stage arts. And we can see that may be a question we have to address, only by looking at these global figures. Musical styles, so we ask the choirs to pick up 3 styles they sing the most. And that's interesting. We have 20th century and contemporary music, almost 60%. I mean, you can read the results. I think it's interesting. So in the end, we hope to be able to fine-tune these results by comparing countries. That would be wonderful. Or maybe not countries, but type of choirs. Make a typology. Okay, youth choir or male choirs, or choirs with when a choir pays the conductor for rehearsal, what do they sing? This kind of thing we can start to analyze later. What are the aims of the choirs? These were questions also. So when it's green or greenish, that's an aim and it's being reached or not. So they are trying to help the well-being of singers, the socialization of singers, to produce concerts, and to lesser extent to provide a leisure activity, and so on. But for example, handicap integration is not really a big aim, a shared aim by this global mass of choirs. Now we have facts also about are the conductors being paid for rehearsal and concerts. So it's about half of the time in half of the choirs, let's say. We gather stats about singers being amateur in the sense of not being paid. These people, this is an amateur word, at least in our sample. But I mean, we also know that from knowing how the choirs are working. Solo singers sometimes are being paid. I don't know if you have remarks or any kind of question regarding these figures, which are once again quite brutal and flat, but I think they still say something about the situation. We added questions also about the type of scores that the choirs are using, because that's a question that is of interest for the composers, for the editors, for the choir world in general. What kind of score are they using? And we hope to be able to analyze these practices in different countries regarding this typology of choirs. What do they do, and are they using original scores or not, using photocopies? And so we will end up having some information about this fact. The idea, that's just a note, but we will produce a report in 2015, but the online survey will remain active as long as possible over the years, because we'll still gather answer and provide, either keep on in the next project to use this data in the next step of this Singing Europe initiative, or provide the data to research centers or researchers that may be interested to analyze it also. So running an online survey is not very expensive, so we will keep it running just to get higher numbers. With the hope also that the first report will raise awareness and interest in this initiative and will get more choirs answering it. So there will be some kind of effect regarding that. We also have more structural questions in the questionnaire. For example, what is the legal form of the ensemble? So some of them are only a gathering of singers, and then you have different type of integration in a pre-existing organization. Are they autonomous or not? And then you can also cross this information with where are they rehearsing, what are their budgets, and get a more finely tuned picture. I don't know if that kind of information rings a bell, if that corresponds to what you were thinking or not. Is it coherent with preconceptions? And then, okay, this is a non-profit word for most part of it, because the yellow one is public sector, which is also in a way non-profit. So there is no real business involved or profit involved in the core word. Okay, so these were just a few results I wanted to show briefly to you. So what you will have to do now is just forget all of these numbers, because they are very temporary and they should not be used for the time being in any context, because they would be out of context in a way. But I just wanted to show what this kind of tool can bring us. What we need now in the months to come is to spread the information about the website and the online survey, so as to have as many choirs answer it as possible. And of course, if you know people who have access to statistics, to any kind of data about any country in the whole continental Europe, we are very much interested, because then we can save a lot of time in our detective work, and it's time consuming and a bit frustrating sometimes. So please get in touch with us if you have any information. So that was a short version of our presentation. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, we can discuss, and have an early coffee, which will be good too. Thank you.